guys, if you get a 0% similarity score, something has gone wrong in your process, and it is very likely that you have paraphrased your own work to death to the point that it lost the meaning that will be associated with the discipline. These are the conventions for how we write. It's like how you recognize the Amapiano sound, right? So even if there will be some differences or some unique elements in the way that a song is arranged, there are actually things that make you recognize this is Amapiano. I will put my hand up. I might have made the first mistake in that video by calling it the plagiarism score, when in fact it is a similarity score that helps us to assess if there has been plagiarism. So whenever we paraphrase, especially using the AI tools, my experience has been that if you give it too much power, it also kills off the lingo or the terminology of the discipline that will help others to actually recognize you. There were also people who had some very angry messages. Somebody came and said, "Futek." I was like, but why? God, or why? Two days ago, I put up a video that was talking about plagiarism and why you can't get a 0% score in relation to that. That video has since gone viral on TikTok, but it was very interesting in terms of the types of comments that came out. So whereas there were people who were actually confirming what I was saying about plagiarism, that you cannot get a 0% score when you are being assessed for plagiarism, there were also people who had some very angry messages. Somebody came and said, "Futek." I was like, but why? God, or why? But Yikolape's corner. So today I'm just going to try to help you guys understand what is happening in terms of plagiarism, especially in the era of AI, because that was the background of the video, and then try to take you through what the expectations are from an academic integrity perspective, what it is, what actually leads to a conclusion that someone has plagiarized, and what sort of tools are available to us to access that, and some of the problems with paraphrasing in particular, because a lot of people seem to have a fixation on paraphrasing. So tonight's live is just going to help you understand the fundamentals of plagiarism and the things that haven't changed over time and the things that have changed as a result of AI, the advent of AI, and what you can do for yourself. So one of the common questions that I have been getting is my score too low? I have 32%, is that too high? I have 5%, should I increase it? And that's not what it is. So I am going to try to help you to understand plagiarism so that you are empowered next time to make the right decisions for yourself. So let's start with the background in terms of the history and expectations where plagiarism is concerned. Even though we have had AI as a tool that has been a disruptor in terms of academic writing, the expectations in relation to plagiarism never changed. There may have been messengers who changed. Actually, I will be even bolder. There are messengers who came and they delivered the wrong message, which was you can now eliminate plagiarism by using these paraphrasing tools and you get a 0% score and you will be fine. But that's not what it was. That was never the issue or the preoccupation in academic writing. So I will start by saying, in that viral video, I made the mistake of saying plagiarism score, and then it took us to different places, right? So some people came out and said, no, it's the similarity score. And then based on the similarity score, assessors are going to check if the work has been plagiarized in any way. So I will put my hand up. I might have made the first mistake in that video by calling it the plagiarism score, when in fact it is a similarity score that helps us to assess if there has been plagiarism. So a case of malpractice in a piece of work that has been turned in. So what is plagiarism? There's a very, very simple definition. Plagiarism is taking someone's work and passing it off as yours, meaning that you would have failed to actually acknowledge that you took this work from somewhere else. So anything that you take from somewhere else and you fail to give credit, you have plagiarized. And based on this definition alone, then you will understand why paraphrasing doesn't take away the problem of plagiarism. It can mask plagiarism, but it does not take away the fact that you may have taken someone else's work or work that exists somewhere else and passed it off as yours because you did not actually acknowledge or give credit to the source. So when we look at it in this very simple way, then we have to see like why paraphrasing then becomes a problem. It's actually, in addition to the fact that it doesn't take away the fact that you have stolen someone else's work and try to get away with it through paraphrasing. Paraphrasing sometimes kills some of the most important, valuable aspects of writing. So in academic writing, they are usually going to be two things that are important. The first relates to the technical terms that are used within your own discipline, or we call it the lingo of the discipline. So in my discipline, you will find a lot of papers by default that have the phrase operations and supply chain management. Sometimes it will be operations, logistics, and supply chain management. Probably every third paper that you read on supply chain management is going to use that phrase. It means that we cannot escape the use of that phrase or term, because within the discipline, people have a shared understanding of what it actually means. And it helps us to have conversations. If we stick to the same terminology, then we know we are having a conversation and we are working together to advance the knowledge within the discipline. So I cannot suddenly get creative and change that terminology, operations and supply chain management, to something else, because then I lose my audience and then I'm no longer part of that conversation. So whenever we paraphrase, especially using the AI tools, my experience has been that if you give it too much power, it also kills off the lingo or the terminology of the discipline that will help others to actually recognize your work. Now, this lingo or these standard phrases are the ones that usually end up leading to a similarity score above 0. So part of your similarity score when it comes to checks for plagiarism comes from these specific phrases that are used within a discipline. Some of them come from the general genre of academic writing, where you have some standard phrases that we use to achieve specific goals. They're the phrases that you use within the discipline, and then they're also the phrases that we use within academic to achieve that. And the third one is the reference list. So referencing is super standardized, and for that reason, it's impossible for you to create a unique reference list. We have rules for how we reference journal articles, how we reference book chapters, how we reference online sources, and as a result, always there will be similarity with other sources, because you will be using exactly the same sources as other sources are using. And when you do the referencing right, then you are actually going to get a hit. So let me give you some examples when it comes to general academic writing, because I have referenced the academic phrase bank, for example, and told people, like, if you really want to improve your academic writing, rather than paraphrasing your work to death, actually spend some time on the academic phrase bank and try to see like what are the standard phrases that we use in academic writing, that when we see implicated in a similarity score, we are not losing our minds, because we actually expect it. These are the conventions for how we write. It's like how you recognize the Amapiano sound, right? So even if there will be some differences or some unique elements in the way that a song is arranged, there are actually things that make you recognize this is Amapiano. So it's the same with how we do academic writing. There are specific conventions that we follow, that even if every piece of work is unique, there are some elements that help us recognize the academic writing. So here are some examples that I am finding from the phrase bank. So those of you who don't know, if you just Google academic phrase bank, you're going to get it. This is from Manchester University, or University of Manchester. Forgive me, I keep confusing these two universities, and I've landed on one of my favorite things. So one of the things that is covered in the academic phrase bank is the phrases that we use in academic writing to be critical. So to show that we are expressing some kind of concern or dissatisfaction with the current state of the literature. And the one that I have at the bottom, I think when I counted before I started, had something more than 12 words in sequence that you can expect to read in any piece of work. So it reads, the experimental data are rather controversial, and there is no general agreement about dash, dash, dash. So you will find a lot of research that is in the experimental space that will use exactly this phrase. And we are wired as academic readers and writers to actually look for those phrases, to recognize them, and to see them as a legitimate part of the toolbox that we have in order to express certain things. So when we see it, we don't say you plagiarize so and so. We're like, okay, so this person is actually being critical here. They're being critical of experimental data. They are pointing out the controversies that are within this data, and then they are going to offer us some kind of solution later. So it's phrases like these that mean that your similarity score, in as far as plagiarism is concerned, cannot be zero. Because if you're doing academic writing right, you are going to lean into these conventions, and you're also going to use these types of terminologies. So some other examples, they say researchers have not treated X in much detail. So a lot of people are going to write like that. There's no other way that you could write it if you really wanted to be concise and to the point. Or such approaches, however, have failed to address blah, right? So these are things that we will tend to see in academic writing. And even as we develop our own unique style of writing, we will still always borrow from these conventions, and we are going to make our own judgments about how we like to write. And the interesting thing when you ask linguists, right, is that even if we all use these same standard phrases to achieve particular things, so the example that I've used being critical, still our writing is unique. So over time, linguists can analyze academic texts and they can say, this was Noni who was writing here, because Noni develops a particular style and there will be certain things that they do. So if I think about my own writing, for example, I like using and to start sentences in academic writing. And for me, this is a replacement for furthermore. I still use furthermore in my academic writing, but there might be 3 or 4 sentences where I just start with and, because I find it to be powerful in a way, at least the way I see it. Like, I tell you an important point and I put a period on it and I want you to hold on to it. Then I give you another point and I start the sentence with and. So I still continue from where I left rather than saying furthermore or in addition to. I also like starting sentences with but instead of however. So I still use however in my writing, or I can use sometimes in contrast, but I also like to use the word but, because sometimes I think it's a much more powerful, much more effective way to really grab the reader's attention. So I have started freestyling the genre of academic writing, but I'm still within the conventions, and you can still recognize what I'm trying to achieve with the way that I write. So everyone writes like this, and as a result, we are not going to avoid similarity scores above 0. And the tragedy of the paraphrasing tools is that they have actually taken away these conventions that actually make writing more simplified, but also that allow people within a particular subgenre of academic writing or a particular discipline to advance a conversation about something leading to the improvement in the state of knowledge. So when we look at your assignment, so let's come to the assignment space and how students write. This is the first point, why I'm saying that your similarity score cannot be 0, because there are these conventions and there are these standard terminologies that are used within your discipline that everyone is going to use. As a result, if we run your assignment through a plagiarism checker like Turnitin, we shouldn't get a 0% score, because your references will turn out similar to others, plus these phrases and other conventions in academic writing, right? So what are we doing then with paraphrasing in academic writing if it is not to avoid plagiarism? I can think of 3 important reasons why we paraphrase, and the paraphrasing actually helps us to improve the state of the work that we are turning in. One is to synthesize, right? So if I am writing an essay on a particular topic and I am reading, or I have had to read 15 papers in order to put together that essay, if I will try to summarize each of the individual papers, I'm never going to have enough word space and my ideas will be scattered, because I'm just presenting 15 things to you that are not necessarily aligned. But I can actually arrange or categorize the information across these 15 sources into themes that I'm able to talk to you about in a much more condensed way. So synthesis is part of the paraphrasing. I will have to tell you that 3 of the sources that I read are making this general argument. right? And for me to present this general argument across 3 references that were written by different people using different words, I'm going to have to find my own words. And the synthesis actually does improve the quality of the work. So what reduces your plagiarism score is that you have to synthesize, bring together these ideas in order to be able to construct your own unique narrative about the state of knowledge, and therefore be able to proceed to be critical about that state of knowledge and be able to say something else, right? We also paraphrase because we also need some kind of way to scope, right? So if I'm writing an essay, I have a particular focus within that essay. And some of the things in the different bits of literature that I read may or may not be part of that focus. So when I paraphrase, I'm actually focusing my work more, and I'm actually pulling the information from those sources that is relevant for what I need to say. Then I'm going to have to paraphrase it so that actually I am coherent in my writing and my line of reasoning can be traced and people can actually see what I'm doing. And then finally, of course, there's a context, right? So when I write the essay, I'm writing it within a particular context. And within that particular context, then it means that I might have to make adaptations to the text that I'm reading, and then I'm going to have to present them. So we are still going to have to be able to reference the different sources as a way of acknowledging that these are not my ideas. I am summarizing the ideas in the literature. I am criticizing these ideas in the literature. I am adopting these ideas in the literature, and this is fine. So as long as you cite them, you are going to be okay. There are not going to be any issues. We also get sometimes a high similarity score. What tends to increase it, especially with essays, is that we like to use definitions. So I'm going to take the definition of this particular context from this particular author, which means that I may take an entire sentence from that original piece of work and I will cite it right, but sometimes it comes up flagged. So as a result, the similarity score is always going to be high. So this is why I said within that video that, guys, if you get a 0% similarity score, something has gone wrong in your process. And it is very likely that you have paraphrased your own work to death to the point that it lost the meaning that will be associated with the discipline, and that it lost the coherence that is created by the standard terminology or phrases that we use in academic writing that help people to understand like the point that you are making right away. So this is that. And if it is so, then what is the process from an academic perspective or an educator's perspective? So you have turned in your assignment and we have received it, and Turnitin gives me a similarity score. And it tells me that, I don't know, this assignment, Junior asked in the comments just before I started this live, I have a 32% score for a dissertation. Is that good or bad? Actually, I don't know, right? So what I know is that my institution has given me a threshold. It has said that any similarity score that is at or above this point, you have to check to ensure that there has been no plagiarism, because the higher the score, the higher the likelihood that there is plagiarism. But at that point, it's just that. It's the likelihood that there has been plagiarism. So when I get the similarity score and it is above the threshold at which I must check the sources, then I'm going to have to do it. So in the comments, I had some people say in our institution it's 10%. Some people gave 15%. I am aware of 18%, I'm aware of 25%, but for different reasons, different institutions are going to set a threshold, right? And so if it is above the threshold, so let's say it's 15% threshold, it means all the assignments that I get that are above 15%, I'm going to have to pull out and take a look what is happening. And what I would do as a first step is to check the references, right? So if I exclude the references from the similarity score calculation, does the score actually go much lower? Because usually a lot of these hits come from the reference list. So when people are saying, oh, my score is high, I'm going to say, okay, can you check your reference list and can you check if it is coming out hit or not? And then if that is the case, you may not need to worry. If you've actually done the work yourself, you have done the proper citations, and you get a high score, then usually the first suspect is the reference list. So we are able to quickly exclude that. So good students might have a reference list that is twice as long as everyone else's. So they actually do sometimes get higher scores. So you can get a score that is higher than the threshold that has been set. An assessor looks at it and they conclude that there has been no violation. There's nothing that needs to be done because most of the hits are actually coming from the reference list or they're coming from the standard text. These days, we expect students to make some standard declarations like, I declare this is original work, I did it by myself, I didn't run it through AI or anything. Whatever it is that you are asked to do to make a declaration, there will be standard text that's going to come out hit for everyone else. So we know it, we see it, we recognize it, we exclude it, and then we look at the overall text. Then when we look at the overall text, so remember academic phrase bank, if I will see a statement like previous published studies are limited to local surveys, I will know that this is like a very standard convention in academic writing. So I'm not going to be bothered by it. And I might actually exclude it, especially if it is, it's still making an argument. So it's not something that I'm going to dwell on. And as a result, the actual possibility of plagiarism, we're actually systematically going through it to see if there has been plagiarism. But if I suddenly see this whole paragraph that appears there, and this paragraph doesn't have the references, but it's coming out exactly the same, I will be like, I have better odds of winning the lottery than this person producing a paragraph that's exactly like one that exists in another source. So what these plagiarism checkers do is they also allow us to cross-reference against the source from which this was picked up. So if it's a whole paragraph, I can actually go to the source and I can check and I can see what happened. And I can conclude, well, most times if this happens, then it has been plagiarized. And a lot of people usually then get fussy and say, oh, but it was just a paragraph. So remember the definition that I gave you of plagiarism. If you take work from somewhere else and you don't give credit to that original source, you have plagiarized. So from the academic integrity perspective, it doesn't matter if it's just a paragraph. It doesn't matter if it's just a few sentences. Like if it is substantial enough, you have plagiarized and you have actually failed to acknowledge these sources. And then it becomes an academic integrity issue. At that point, you are then likely to be invited for an academic integrity hearing. I do know, talking to people from all over the world, that in some institutions, there's not even a hearing. If they see it, they will say, we found your work plagiarized and we have taken away these many points. And that's the end of the matter. But I sit in a system where actually we have to have a conversation, establish what happened, and then a decision will only be made after a conversation has been had. So before the conversation, it's not an accusation. It's actually saying, okay, something doesn't look right in your work. We need to have a conversation to figure out what happened. And then after that conversation, a decision is going to be made. So in the end, I think it's really important. I made that video to set people free. Like, don't be freaking out over a similarity score above 0, because there are legitimate reasons why that score is above 0, and we expect it to be above 0. And we will only be concerned about plagiarism when we see chunks of text that are not properly referenced in these sources you actually didn't disclose. This is when you have done it. And this is why we say paraphrasing actually doesn't help with the problem of plagiarism. So what does that look like? A lot of people think that, oh, if I have a high score, only then will I have a problem. But I can think of at least 2 instances that I've come across where people had a low score or even almost 0, and they still got booked for plagiarism. So there were 2 scenarios. One scenario, someone was reading an assignment that was turned in. They had done, like, the standard is for us to check the similarity score, looked okay, didn't seem problematic. But as they were reading it, it felt so familiar, and they were bothered by it. They couldn't shake the feeling that I've seen this somewhere. But how come then it's not actually showing up as something that is plagiarized? So after a while, they actually suspected, no, this comes from an academic paper. It's something that I have seen in an academic paper. So they took the academic paper and they compared it to the assignment. And they actually could see that for at least a few paragraphs, this student had actually plagiarized the academic paper, but they had paraphrased everything. And then because they had paraphrased everything that they got from the academic paper, And because this is an expert reader, they're looking at it and they're thinking, this is the same. Even where they put the references that are supposedly coming from the literature, they have those things in the same places, right? How many sentences they have, it's exactly the same, but they just paraphrased. So in this case, because they actually paraphrased an academic paper, they didn't cite that paper. And this marker actually happened to know the paper and they were able to make the connection. The student was booked for plagiarism. So this is meant to tell you that paraphrasing doesn't take away the problem of plagiarism. What takes away the problem of plagiarism is actually citing the sources, giving the due credit for where your work came from. And then in a second scenario, it was what they call self-plagiarism. A few students, actually, it happens to them. Sometimes it's because they haven't been fairly warned, right? But a student had failed an assignment. They were given an opportunity to improve the assignment. And then this person said when they were going through it, they actually, again, felt this is familiar. Like, I have seen this, I have marked this before. So when they pulled out the original assignment, they actually saw that the student just paraphrased essentially most of the same original assignment, but they hadn't done anything substantial in terms of the fundamentals that were problematic that led to the fail in the first instance. So one, this assignment had still failed because it still didn't address the fundamentals. And two, there was plagiarism because they simply paraphrased a lot of the chunks of text without actually creating something that was new. So plagiarism is a bit more complex and complicated than people think. And you can actually get issues even though you have a low score, or you may not get issues even if you have a high score, because what has to be established at the end of the day is, did you take work from somewhere else and fail to give credit? Yes or no? That's it. And the score for us is just an indicator, right? It's like an invitation to take a closer look at something and then be able to establish if it has happened. So this is the things that you need to know. So people also ask me, what is the ideal score? Really, there isn't. So I think based on this conversation, then it should be clear why I cannot say, if you message me and say I have 15%, is it okay? I don't know, because I don't know where this 15% is coming from. The only question I can ask you is, have you given due credit for all of the references that you have used? And have you not tried to mask your plagiarism by actually paraphrasing? Because if you paraphrased and didn't give credit to the source, someone might pick it up, especially if they are well read in terms of the sources that you have used to actually do this, right? And I think at the end of the day, whenever we talk about academic integrity, I also sense that a lot of people feel like, oh, this is universities just being difficult. I had a lot of people in the comments saying, oh, you just don't want us to graduate. Again, this year, again, you like, guys, academic integrity is much more than what we want or what we are trying to protect. It's like, this is your first test as someone who's at the foundations of their career, of how you can be trusted, how much can you be trusted to be honest. Because remember, integrity is the things that you do when no one else is looking and there's a good chance that they may not find out. This is how you have to think about academic integrity. So if you get an assignment and they say to you, don't use AI at all in this assignment, you might use it successfully and you might get away with it. And that says something about your integrity. And because a lot of the university degrees means that people graduate into these professions of responsibility, whether you're going into finance or you're going into medicine or even you're going into education, right? There will be times in your career where you are the only person in the room who knows more than anyone else. And you might be the only person in the room who's able to detect that something has gone wrong. And sometimes that thing going wrong might point right back to you. So academic integrity is that foundational basis upon which you build, like, what do I do when no one is looking or no one is able to find out that I have done something wrong, and just coming forward. Because whenever we hide these things, sometimes people's lives are at stake. Sometimes people's life savings are at stake. So we have to be able to put our hand up even when other people would not know, and tell them, okay, look, guys, I think here I messed up. So think of academic integrity not just as something that universities do to make your life difficult, but it is something that we try to let people know, like, there's an expectation on you because you're going to have so much power or so much influence in whatever role you're going to assume. Being able to carry yourself with integrity is going to be important. And that is all it is. So this is all that there is to it. There isn't a big conspiracy or anything of that sort. And I think another comment that is worth addressing, I think there were a lot of people who were showing frustration in the comments, like, oh, you're changing it again. You just keep changing. What do you call it? You just keep changing the goalposts. We don't know what you want anymore. First it was too high. Now you're saying it's too low. Guys, the expectations in terms of academic writing and in particular in terms of plagiarism never changed. What's changed were the messengers, the people that come to you and they say to you, you can get rid of plagiarism with this paraphrasing tool. I am willing to bet with all the money that I have in the world, it's not a lot, but it's all the money that I've got, right? Like, whoever told you that likely wasn't an educator. They were not affiliated with an academic institution, because I can't even imagine myself telling students, just paraphrase your way out of it, because I'm actually more concerned with students becoming critical thinkers and learning how to use this information from different sources, synthesizing it to build some kind of analysis and lead to new knowledge that is going to be valuable in some way. And this skill is important, not because you need to get your degree, but because you are going to deal with a lot of complex issues in your own job. You are going to have information from multiple sources that you need to assess and then use in a way that is going to allow you to make the best possible decisions. So the idea that in education we have moved to the bar, as far as plagiarism is concerned, I can tell you now, no, it never changed. The expectation never changed. But there were people who were selling these tools who came to you and told you things that were simply not true. And as a result, then we have this confusion because, the waters are muddied now and it's really difficult to understand things.